Emily had always been afraid of the house. It wasn't the way it creaked at night, or how the wind made the old windows rattle. It was something deeper, something she couldn't explain. Ever since she had moved into the place after her grandmother's passing, she felt as if she was being watched. The house was a sprawling two-story Victorian with tall windows and peeling white paint. Her grandmother had lived there alone for as long as Emily could remember. The house, nestled deep in the countryside, had always seemed out of place, like it didn't belong to this time, or any time at all. On her first night alone, Emily was unpacking boxes in the attic when she heard a noise, a soft scraping sound like something being dragged across the floor. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The attic was cluttered with old furniture, stacks of yellowed books, and boxes that had remained untouched for decades. There was no one else in the house. "It's just the wind," she told herself, though her hands trembled as she continued unpacking. The sound came again, closer this time, a scraping, followed by a faint whisper. Emily whipped around, eyes darting across the shadowy room, but saw nothing. The attic was still. Shaking off her unease, Emily hurried downstairs to her bedroom. The house felt unnervingly quiet, as if it were holding its breath, waiting. She tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she felt a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, as if unseen eyes were fixed on her. That night, she dreamed of the walls. In her dream, they were alive, pulsing, breathing. She saw hands pushing through the wallpaper, pale fingers clawing to get out. The walls whispered her name, calling to her, and in the dream, she felt compelled to listen. Emily woke in a cold sweat. The image of those hands burned into her mind. For the next few days, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. She tried to distract herself with work, but no matter what room she was in, she could feel it. The oppressive sensation of eyes tracking her every move. Late one night, as she lay in bed, Emily heard the sound again, the scraping, louder now, echoing through the empty house. She forced herself to get up, grabbed a flashlight, and headed towards the sound. It seemed to be coming from the walls. The sound led her down the narrow hallway to a small door at the end she had never noticed before. It was half hidden behind an old, dusty mirror, as if someone had deliberately tried to cover it up. Her heart raced as she reached for the handle, cold metal under her fingers. The door creaked open to reveal a narrow, winding staircase leading down into darkness. Emily hesitated, but the scraping sound was louder now, as if something was moving just below. She couldn't turn back. Flashlight in hand, she descended the stairs, her breath shallow and quick. The air grew colder the deeper she went, the walls pressing in close. At the bottom of the stairs was a small stone room. It was damp, and the smell of mold and rot was overpowering. In the middle of the room stood a large, rusted mirror, its surface covered in grime. As Emily approached, her flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. The whispering began again, soft at first, but growing louder until the words were clear. "Help us!" Emily froze. The voice was coming from the walls. Suddenly, the mirror's surface began to ripple, like water disturbed by a stone. Emily stumbled back, her flashlight flickering wildly. She could see something moving inside the mirror. A figure, pale and distorted, pressing its hands against the glass. "Help us," it whispered again, its voice a rasping plea. Before Emily could react, the figure pushed its way through the surface of the mirror, its body stretching impossibly, bones cracking as it emerged into the room. It was thin, unnaturally so, its skin pale and stretched tight over its skull. Its eyes were black pits, and its mouth hung open in a silent scream. Emily stumbled backwards, her breath caught in her throat. The thing from the mirror reached for her, its bony fingers outstretched. She turned and bolted up the stairs, her heart pounding in her ears. The thing followed, its scraping limbs dragging behind it as it moved faster than any human should be able to. Emily's mind raced as she fled through the house, every shadow seeming to twist and writhe as she ran. She slammed the door to her bedroom and pressed her back against it, trying to catch her breath. The house was silent again, but she knew it was still out there, waiting. In the quiet, Emily heard a faint sound, a whisper. It was coming from the walls, soft and insistent. "Help us!" Her blood ran cold. There was more than one. The walls began to bulge and shift, like something inside them was trying to break free. Pale hands pushed through the wallpaper, stretching and clawing at the surface, while muffled voices filled the air, all begging for help. Emily backed away, her mind screaming for her to run, but she was frozen in place, paralyzed by terror. The door burst open, and the thing from the mirror lunged at her. Its face was inches from hers now, its black eyes staring into her soul. It grabbed her arm with icy fingers, pulling her toward the wall. "No!" Emily screamed, struggling to free herself, but it was too strong. The hands from the walls reached out, pulling her in, wrapping around her like cold, clammy vines. With a final, desperate cry, Emily was dragged into the wall, the wallpaper closing over her like a shroud. The room fell silent. The next day, the house stood quiet and still, as if nothing had happened. But if you listened closely, you could hear it. The faint, muffled sound of someone whispering from within the walls, calling out for help. If you like the story, so like, comment, and subscribe my channel. I love you all.